This is aisle 42. In this episode of aisle 42, we chat with Jasmine, co-founder of Big Mountain Foods, about the brand's journey, family culture, and mission to make allergen-free plant-based foods that are healthy and delicious. Jasmine talks about shifting from mental health work to building the brand with her mom, as well as the challenge of getting kids to love healthy food. We also dive into their product lineup, how they're growing in Canada and the US, and the tricky reality of profitability in food manufacturing. And Jasmine shares how they're reusing byproducts like okra and working towards a circular economy. I love this stuff. All right, let's jump into it. Here's Jasmine from Big Mountain Foods, because the future of food starts now. Jasmine, due to your schedule and mine, or even hydro transformers exploding into flames outside your facility, you and I have rescheduled this conversation a few times. So never have I meant this more than today. I have been looking forward to this for a long time. I'm so glad we're doing this. So to kick things off with the big question here, Jasmine, what's the one change in the food system that would excite you the most?
Okay, well, first, Corwin, I'm glad that we're finally meeting. I forgot that I sent you that video of the Transformers literally on fire. The beauties of owning your own facility, I tell you. It's a new challenge every day. But besides that, what does it mean to me looking into the future, like in food right now? What's important to Big Mountain is we're really evolving into a company that is advocating for regenerative and organic. As a mom, newer mom, my son's 5 years old, so he's just getting exposed to the McDonald's and the Sour Patch Kids of the world. We're finding that it's not the norm to be the mom or dad grocery shopping right now that's buying the better for you products. I find that we're still in this generation where it's cooler to be the mom that shows up with the Sour Patch Kids. And how I see the world going forward and what would be amazing to us is just seeing a world where healthy food habits start at birth, and these poor children aren't exposed to all of this because it's so hard to break the habits once your taste buds and everything have tried all of this junk. And so how do we get to a place where everyone's eating more healthy and isn't exposed to all of this? Because really it's a systematic issue right now, and how are we going to go forward and help change?
Yeah, so healthy is cool. That would be
Yeah, yeah.
like if healthy was cool, that's how I'd summarize that. I agree with you. I think our daughter's 11, so we're sort of, yeah, the sour. Yeah, funny that you brought up Sour Patch Kids because, well, being in the food industry, we're surrounded by all these wonderful candy companies that are trying to be
Yeah.
cool and different and trying to be, better for you. My daughter's game to try pretty much almost anything I bring her. When we come home from trade shows, she goes through all my bags. She's pulling stuff out. The candy is certainly at the top of the list, but helping her understand, you know, why something is healthy, how we would expect her, her body to respond to something she's consuming. And then, of course, she adds on layers of her own bias and, well, Mr. Beast made this. I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, you're right. He did put his logo on that. But anyway, yeah, no, that's well said. I appreciate that. So I have to call the moment here. You work with your mom.
Yes, I
Not
do.
a lot of people do that. What's it like to lead a plant-based food company with family? I'm really curious how that plays into the culture of your company, especially with the mom who's such a brazen carnivore.
Yeah. Well, I've been full time with the company now, I guess it's 12 years. So, interesting enough, I was on a different career path. I really wanted to focus on mental health. And as we see what's going on right now in BC, we have a ginormous mental health crisis. And so I was going down the path of getting into the mental health unit and doing my degree in psychology and all this. And my mom just looked at me and said, you can go down this road, but you're looking at serious burnout. And how long are you going to be able to sustain a career like that? Instead, why don't you work with me and give it a shot? And we'll become so powerful and big that we'll be able to help all these people in our own way. So big ambitions, because you know what? Burnout in food is a real thing too. We're hearing it more and more. Back then, that wasn't even a topic on burnout of entrepreneurs and everything. Just even 10 years ago, I think it's amazing everyone's talking about it now. But so we embarked on this journey together. And at that time, there was nothing in the plant based space that was allergen free. And I have celiac disease. My sister is lactose intolerant. My sister-in-law and my husband and half of our family doesn't eat meat. So it was very challenging to have a plant-based meal for everyone at the dinner table that didn't have allergies. And my mom is five-star cook, like phenomenal chef. So she's really into like the Indian and Indo-Pacific cuisine that she grew up in that culture. Yeah. So fast forward, I think the reason why we work so well together is because we both know our boundaries and limits as professionals. And then we just bounce off of each other on who tackles what. I would say our biggest flaw, though, is we definitely don't spend enough time together working on the strategic side of the business and the future. Right now we're in high growth mode, and so it's a lot of fast paced, putting out fires, big highs and lows every day. One day I swear we'll write a book. It's insane the highs and lows that we go through. But how we make it work is, when we're traveling, we always try to do one extra day so we can sightsee because we're on a plane like every 3 weeks. So then we get some time together and bond. We actually even live next door to each other, which is wild. We share fences. So we're really embarked on this journey together. I don't think there's any other way at this point. We're like one person as of now.
That's unreal. And maybe your staff will start buying houses around you guys, and it'll just be one
Yeah,
big. You just
I
have a
wish.
compound. Yeah.
That's the one thing with Canada though that I if I could say one more thing about the future is people and businesses really need to start collaborating more. It's remarkable how much when you start to share resources and open up and become collaborative, how much more you can save on costing and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I was talking with a brand on the weekend that their biggest, the big bad competitor in their category is actually have become friends of theirs and are helping this small brand. And that type of thing, and I know you guys have seen, that as well in your space. It's pretty remarkable when collaboration can kind of lead and drive a category forward. So it's really special. Yeah. You mentioned allergies. Let's talk about that for a moment, because when I first was exposed to your brand, to me it felt like, oh, this is the allergy, like this was the allergy category. This is the for people who can't eat all that stuff, that here's what they get to have. But as I consumed more of your product, and especially as you guys have innovated, it's been interesting to see how at least in my home, I'll be very candid with you, in our home, we don't look at your products anymore as the allergen free option. It kind of leans into some of the other areas that we're looking for. We're looking for flavor and texture, and now I even brag about it when I put one of those links that you guys, is it called a Fiesta link?
Yep.
I'm sorry, I buy them. I don't remember the name of them. Fiesta links. We tried it for the first time about a year ago, and now it's a staple in our home. I'll feed it to anybody. I don't explain it. I don't tell people what's in it or not in it. I know them. I know who's in my home and what they can and cannot have. I serve it proudly, and they always ask because they're like, this is delicious. And then I get to tell them a plant-based story. I get to tell them an allergen-free story, and it amplifies it. But allergen-free eating is getting really complicated in the grocery store. And I think that some shoppers are just almost paralyzed. So When you look at that space, do you see hope for the allergen concerned shopper, or are you worried about them as well?
You know what? And I'm one of them. I'm actually right now taking a step back just from the gluten free category for myself. So I was one of the first people that would jump on board on all the gluten free breads and crackers and snacks, and same with the plant based milks and whatnot. And then I realized that, I was feeling bloated and gut issues and everything. And now I'm just really focusing on companies that are very, it's clean label, less ingredients. Like Jovial Pasta is a great example. I wish that they could get more distribution in Canada. They're just phenomenal. And their gluten-free is two ingredients, slow processing of the grains, and processed in Italy. So you're getting that trust back and that nostalgia of eating really good quality Italian wheat. So I think the customer is shifting to that, and that's going to be the way that the future should be anyway.
We jumped right in. We got to give listeners a chance here. Would you mind sharing with listeners what it is that you guys make? Like, what are some of the top SKUs and products that you guys have in grocery stores that they maybe have seen before or consume themselves?
Sure. So we started out with our original veggie patty. So that one came on the market, gosh, like 38 years ago. And my mom, Kim, she had a vegan cafe in Kitsilano and was serving that veggie patty the same time around like Eve's Cuisine was coming out and whatnot. And the Safeway buyer actually came into her restaurant and saw her working so hard, three young kids, and told her, "Why don't you make something with a shelf life and that is in a package?" And so she, did some research, went to the retailer and put it on the shelves in the deli, just in like a sandwich bag or a bread bag. And it had like a 3-day shelf life. And that's kind of where her journey began. So from there, 38 years later, we've introduced products like Collie Crumble and Lion's Mane Crumble. So those would be your meat replacements for ground chicken or ground beef. But we're using, cauliflower and lion's mane mushrooms, shiitake, all that good stuff. And then most recently, we commissioned the first ever soy free tofu factory in the world using Canadian fava beans, which are remarkable, by the way. Our beans are glyphosate free, no spraying. And what's exciting is we're actually planting the first ever organic fava crop right now, actually, this spring, that's ever been done in Canadian history. So, very proud that we're pioneering that. And so, with that tofu, now we're, getting traction in the US and Canada. That's really what we're trying to focus on is this tofu alternative, but it tastes, functions, and performs just like tofu with no fat, and it's actually a bit higher protein than traditional tofu. So we're sold at a premium, and that definitely took some convincing at first with, the lovely salespeople that want you to be price aligned with the very, very cheap tofu that sells for $1.99. But what we've proven over the past couple years is consumers are purchasing our tofu, but we're not stealing the business from soy tofu. We're bringing in new customers into the tofu market, especially men, which is quite interesting to see. We have no politics against soy at all, but there is, certain buzz around hormones and whatnot, and so we're bringing in this whole new shopper, and that's what we're showing the retailer, and they're loving it, and the velocities are crazy on it. So very excited for the tofu. We envision in the next couple years we'll have little plants all over the world, little mini tofu plants. That's the goal. Be first to market in Asia and Australia and Europe if someone doesn't beat us to it.
That's fantastic. I love it. Yeah, your fava bean based tofu is I agree. It does perform exactly like what I want it to do. I've marinated it, I've grilled it, I've chopped it up and put it in stir fry. I've done a lot of things with it. Haven't made a smoothie out of it, though I
That
probably
might be
could.
a bit firm.
Yeah, it might be a little bit hard on my Vitamix, but
Yeah.
it's interesting, and I know for the most part, as of right now, it's sort of a soy-free kind of play, but yet, now consumers are so interested in what is in it instead of what isn't in it, and leaning into that story around fava bean and Canadian farmed pulse grains and just being able to tell that story of regenerative and now organic farming is it's a beautiful thing, isn't it? Do you find that the retailers are responding quite quickly and excitedly to this narrative? Because it must be hard to communicate this stuff on top of everything else plus price and plus everything else.
Yes. Well, it's very interesting, the US versus Canada. So as soon as regenerative started to come out, I guess a year ago, within a few months of Expo West, I say like 25% of the brands had already changed their packaging in the US and were on shelves. And I'm like, how is this even possible that all these companies were just already regenerative? It's like mind blowing. But that's the same thing with organic in the US. You wonder how so many companies at Trader Joe's are organic. Canada's still very much catching up to it. I don't think many people know about regenerative yet. So it'll be a slower process for sure. But with the tariffs and everything, we definitely now are getting a little bit more attention that we're using Canadian grown ingredients. But I will say it took Canada a lot longer to list our Canadian, 100% Canadian grown and manufactured tofu than the US. They were actually about over a year and a half to 2 years behind some of the big retailers here.
That is shocking.
It is. It
So,
is.
what you're saying is that the US market was hotter and more excited for what you guys are doing than your own backyard.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be so tricky. I mean, it's always nice selling into a country that has a strong dollar against the Canadian dollar
Yes.
and that there's so many more customers down there, but yet it's away from what you know, it's away from your closest relationships, your partnerships, your collaborators. So what's it been like growing the brand in the US?
You know what? It's with anything, you got to have patience. We've, restructured our sales team and our strategy many, many times. We've been at it about 7 years now. I would say we're starting to gain some really good traction. We're in stores like Publix, Sprouts, fingers crossed. We've been on a test run at Whole Foods just in the Pac Northwest. We're hoping they're going to give us national distribution. I mean, we're selling like 26 units a week, and the category's average is three.
Wow.
So we're hoping that happens soon. That's another one that we've been nurturing and babying for multiple years. It's still not in Whole Foods National. You'd think that would be the first for the tofu. But overall, they're very receptive. Of course, the exchange is amazing. And, there's just so much opportunity there. And we've invested so much money as well. So to have to take a step back if any tariffs come into effect would be very devastating. Takes a long time to grow in any market.
Yeah, it sure does. And especially for the consumers that, the vegans and non-vegans alike, when they're exploring a new category, like you said it, you're introducing new consumers to a category that's probably gone stale in people's minds or wasn't on their radar. It means that there's this duality of education and marketing, which rarely go hand in hand simultaneously. So it means that from retailer all the way to consumer, you have a lot of challenges right in front of you, but the product performs well and people and I know a lot of shoppers now are shopping with their Yucca apps, right? And they're looking up stuff online, they're hitting QR codes. There's a more and more shoppers are looking at labels and nutritional panels, taking these things seriously, especially when if they're going to pay a premium, they're going to make sure that it's going to do what they want to do. So what's been the consumer feedback down in the US? Do you feel like the response is similar, just a different country, or is there even a different consumer sentiment down there?
Well, the biggest feedback we get is they want it in more stores and they can't find it. That seems like the biggest frustration in the US, especially because we're on social media and whatnot. And they're like, I can't find it in my area. And they get all upset about that. But overall, I would say it's the same, but in terms of like health and wellness, definitely ahead. But it's interesting, the inflation though in Canada for sure was ahead of the US. Now we're starting to see the US catch up a little bit and everything get a bit tighter.
Yeah, the math is changing a little bit, and obviously tariffs amplify it. But with inflation growing, yeah, everyone's sort of looking at the numbers a little differently for sure.
Yes.
You talked about highs and lows of growing the business. When it comes to scaling a brand like yours, what's been one or two of the big challenges that you guys have tackled over the last couple of years coming out of, pandemic era?
Well, I can say something that's maybe current that's happening this week
Oh,
because it's
all right.
changing so much.
That's very
Um,
CPG of you, by the way. It's like, I don't
yeah,
know about the last 2 years, but I can tell you what's happening right now.
yeah, exactly. I had a very and share this because I want others to not feel like they're alone. But I had a meeting with a very well known CFO that's been, worked for all the big brands in the US, scaled many huge corporations. And he was saying we were frustrated on we're in a fairly big plant. We're a bit over our heads. We need more cases. That's it. More volume out of the plant. Overhead's a bit too high here until we start pumping out bigger volumes. We knew that moving in. But he was telling me that, in his history, until you get to 20 million in sales, you're never going to be profitable. And I'm looking at the conversation and thinking to myself, well, if you don't have any investors, it's going to take nowadays maybe 5 to 8 years to become a $20 million company without mass injections of funds. Who's going to fund all that? And how are you going to sustain that? And so, what worries me right now is with all the shifts in grocery and manufacturing, is it seems like it's going back to only the big guys are going to make it unless those investors are still investing in the small guys, which was happening a couple of years ago. There was so much money flying around, it was insane. And now everyone's dialing back on that. So when you hear that, it's hard to keep going because $20 million is a ginormous number when you're making 25 cents off each unit. So that was interesting. And another one, we're starting to get into seasonal items, which is new to us. Another word of advice I hear is that seasonal items are never profitable. They're just a marketing play to get your brand out there more. And so we were presented a P&L on the new roast we're launching, and we were going to be in a loss of, $15,000 every time we did the seasonal listing in the US at one of these grocery stores. And we're just like, at some point, we all have to stop this game and focus on profitability. And we just went in with what we knew confidently that we would make a little bit of money on and didn't go for the, $20,000 loss every single season indefinitely, hoping that they might bring in other products all year round. So it's very interesting what's going on in the CPG game right now and bringing awareness to it. It's a wild ride.
Yeah, it's probably not the most popular thing to say, but, and you mentioned collaboration earlier. Sometimes when I look at some of these categories where there's, better for you, good for you alternatives being made, you kind of want to look at like five of them. Like, why don't you guys get together and do it? Combine all your manufacturing, combine all your investment, combine all your supply chains and all your partnerships and do it together because right now you're all fighting for, a small but growing niche, or especially if you don't have a lot of awareness, then there's not going to be that same consumer drive. So it's like where, there's almost just too much options, too many alternatives, and everyone's doing the same good thing, just slightly different. And you're right. Scaling requires, good margins at high volumes, and small companies can't do that very well. Listen, you mentioned your roast, and I want to say that launch, it was through Costco that I tried it. I'm not sure if it's in other. I haven't seen it around other places. I haven't looked very hard for it because I was buying it at Costco. Um, Roast, see it looked like it launched really well. Like people were getting kind of crazy for it, which is fantastic. And having a product that is seasonal, that's centered around like literally family gatherings, that must have been a really great moment for you guys to see how well that was, the uptake of that product.
Well, execution was an interesting one. So we went to Costco for our first ever live presentation in their kitchen, cooking in the West here. And Kim, of course, she's like avid seller as well as the chef. So she just had the roast, in her back pocket, didn't really tell her broker that she was gonna put it in the oven and cook it for them because everyone wants to be perfectly prepared. But she's kind of on the whim type person. And so she baked it and cut it up for the three Costco people, and they loved it. And they were like, "Well, why don't we try it? But it has to be ready in 2 weeks." And so we launched in the West, the East, never done business with Costco within a couple weeks. So
You're talking like from R&D
yeah,
to
yeah,
being on the
yeah,
shelf.
yeah, yeah. So we are very thankful to have such a good network in Vancouver. My gosh, like Glenmore and Boxmaster and Cultivated Foods, I'll give them all shout outs because they worked they worked around the clock to make it happen with us. Cause at that same time, Kim and I had like 3 shows, we're traveling, we couldn't even be in the plant. We proudly didn't have any delays, got it on shelf. And then what happened is other retailers started seeing it on my LinkedIn that it launched in Costco, and we're like, "What the?" Because we hadn't even given it to anyone. It was supposed to. We were still in concept phase for Thanksgiving 2025 coming up. So then we don't say no to anything. We're nimble enough here. So we got it in Horizon and John Luca, PSC, Save on Foods directly, all so fast. Because you know what, the category wanted it, and we knew that there hadn't been any, new innovation, and what's out there too is again as allergens. So,
Tofurkey.
but yeah, so we
Whoa.
didn't we didn't we didn't expect to get that much traction that fast. But again, it's pretty crazy how retailers can turn things on if they like something. Sometimes they'll delay things for a year or two, but then if they like something, it's like, oh, ready in a week.
And that's got to be that speed to market there. That's got to be one of the things that the large food companies must look at businesses like yours and go, cool, like that's awesome. And so many of these large companies, like that would be 2 years out for a lot of brands. And your guys like 1 week, 2 weeks. All right, let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's go, you know, call in some favors and make it happen. That's so cool. My last question for you is around sustainability. I know your manufacturing process includes sustainability initiatives like zero waste goals. And, that's always a hard thing to do, but I know you guys lean into some of these places and spaces so well. What does it look like on a day to day basis for the Big Mountain Foods team? Like, what are you guys looking to do from a sustainability standpoint to really drive some of these values forward?
So right now, we have a lot of Okara, which is traditionally a byproduct of tofu making. There's I was just reading an article. I think there's like 800 billion tons of it or something just in Japan. That researchers all around the world are looking at what can be done with this Okara, and that could be like going back into biofuel or energy. It's pretty cool, all the things that are coming up, but then how do you scale that? So for the past since we moved into this plant, the past 5 years, we've been deciding and trying to figure out the best options for this Okara, which is essentially fava starch. And so then you'd be competing against, your cornstarch, your arrowroot starch, tapioca fiber, that sort of thing, which can be a bit cheaper in price. And when you put in all the equipment costs, like $2 million to dry it, make it into this functional ingredient, is there a business case for it? And that's the same thing that happens with tofu makers, the oat milks, the spent grains. We all have the same problem. But as of now, before we embark on this drying journey, we actually upcycle this Okara fresh back into our products as a functional starch because there is value in it. There's still protein and starch and fiber. So that's how we're cutting down our waste here, because otherwise we have 10 tons a day of Okara.
That's amazing. So you're putting it right back into the product.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we
Love it.
have a whey byproduct that the same thing happened in the cheese industry many, many years ago. And then they started making the whey protein out of it. And that was actually a byproduct. We're capturing our whey and refiltering it and putting it back into our tofu making to save some water. Because again, tofu making takes a lot of water. So we're repurposing that instead of letting it go down the drain. But long term, we're looking at the Okara not just from a food perspective, but what else can it be used for? Is it, concrete form release agents or biofuel, like a different industry altogether, and what we can do to create more of a circular economy? So lots of research going on behind the scenes.
That's pretty nerdy, by the way.
Yeah.
Like we're gonna make fava bean tofu and we're gonna make
Yeah.
stuff for concrete. Okay. Put that on the P&L.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Jasmine, thank you so much for this conversation. I'm so
Of
impressed
course.
with all that you and your mom and your team do. And I love that we get to work a little bit together as well. And, ultimately, you guys make beautiful products that are really fun to eat. And that, most importantly, in my world, my daughter enjoys. So I'm grateful for that. So thanks again.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Corwin.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Aisle 42. Be sure to grab a Big Mountain product the next time you're in the grocery store and follow them on social. Okay, that's it from me. I'm Corwin Hebert from Ethical Food Group, and I'll see you in the future.